So I was taught that there are the 3 C's of interviewing. And the 3 C's of interviewing are content, or sometimes that's called competency. We have lots of C words we can work with. So this is what we normally think of in a job interview is someone's knowledge, skills, and abilities, often called the KSAs. So when you're hiring for staff, you're often interested in whether they have the content knowledge, the competency to fulfill a position. The other 2 C's are important in hiring staff, but we're going to talk about how they're even more important when you're hiring an AmeriCorps member. The second C is chemistry. Is this person a good fit chemistry-wise with your organization? Are they going to enjoy themselves working there? Oop, I gotta get my tape because I'm losing it. Luckily, content is the least important when it comes to AmeriCorps. And commitment. Okay. I'm gonna grab my tape real quick so I can keep these up here. But commitment, we can all understand why commitment is important for AmeriCorps, because you have to not only fill these positions, you have to have that fabled 100% retention rate. The highest retention rate I ever had during a cohort was 98%. So I don't know if you've ever been able to pull off 100%. I was not. I got 98%, but I felt like that was pretty good. I was proud of that. So for AmeriCorps, you can teach people, and part of AmeriCorps is about helping an AmeriCorps member develop those skills and abilities. You want some alignment. You want them to come in with some skills, some background in your position, but this one is not as important. You want them to be a good fit, which is where the chemistry comes in. And then you also want them to be able to see it through to the end. We know how important that is. So when designing your interview questions and when looking at your screening criteria, you want to design questions that are going to touch on each of these. Now this one is easy, so I'm not going to spend much time on it. I'm sure you're already asking questions and you're looking at their application for where that background knowledge is. Chemistry, how do you get to this? One thing I used to always do, because I worked with partner sites, so I had AmeriCorps members that were placed at schools, at nonprofits, at fire stations, at local government offices. I had every type of different work environment you could imagine that I was recruiting for. So I would ask each site supervisor to tell me, what is a wonderful day at your site look like? Like, as an employee of this site, what do you love about your job? What is an ideal day like? And I remember in particular, one of the sites we worked with was an arboretum. They had an environmental program. And they said, well, on a beautiful day, you know, we're working with the plants, we're working with kids and teaching them about nature, and we're out there and the sun is shining, we have a view of the mountains, you know, we've got our hands dirty in the dirt, and we're getting to see kids have these light bulb moments where they're learning about how the natural cycles work. I was like, great, okay, perfect. I can picture it and I can describe it to a potential applicant. Now, and here's the important point, what does a really bad day look like? And this is when I learned that apparently at this arboretum, it had the look and the feel of a horror movie in the winter, because although they were open in the winter, they weren't open to the public. So they literally were out here way off on a dirt road that you had to drive, that wasn't always plowed. So you had to get there through maybe 6 feet of snow, and then you were out there by yourself. It was completely eerie and quiet. You maybe wouldn't see another person all day long, but then you'd hear like the cackle of the ravens outside, and you'd look and maybe there would be a bear come onto the deck, and you'd have to figure out how to scare the bear away, and you were, maybe concerned for your life. I will say, as a program manager, I was a little bit concerned. Had some safety questions about that. But I also thought, okay, that is interesting. That is an interesting challenge. If I'm recruiting an AmeriCorps member to go to that site, I had to find someone who has that unique disposition in which they are going to be excited to work with crowds, and maybe not now in COVID, but work with kids, work with high energy individuals, deal with crowd control during these busy summer months, but then also not freak out and not quit and not be overwhelmed when it was the middle of winter and they hadn't seen another person all day long and they might get eaten by a bear. So that's how I would use that in an actual interview, is I would actually share that information with a candidate. If we were getting down to the deep interview stage with them, I would say, okay, let me just tell you a little bit more about this position. This is what it's going to look like on a really great day. And let me just fill you in, like, this is also what it can look like. And how do you feel about that? And see what kind of reaction I got. I would say that applied equally as well to when we were hiring for the juvenile court. And so completely different site, completely different challenges, and completely different description of what a great day looked like and what a really negative day looked like. But just as important to be able to set those expectations and check for fit during the interview and hiring process, so that we were sure that these candidates understood what they were getting into and they thought that it sounded great. When you find someone who you tell them what the bad day is going to be like and they go, well, that's not that bad, or, oh, that actually kind of sounds fun, that's when you know you've got someone who is going to be comfortable and a good fit. Okay, I saw maybe some things coming in the chat. Kelsey, did I have any questions or comments I need to know about before we talk about commitment questions?
Yes, we did have, Sarah asked if we would be able to share the rubric slide from the start of this presentation as an attachment.
Yes, we will be. Mm-hmm.
And then sounds like Michael is your perfect chemistry fit for that day of potentially being eaten by bears in the snow.
Excellent. I think they're hiring right now at the Arboretum, so if you want to move out to Flagstaff. They don't have AmeriCorps members at the moment, as far as I know, but they might be having VISTA positions for STEM education. Okay, so commitment, very important, hard to suss out during the interview. However, one way in which I did that was I'd try to get the candidate to visualize what this expectation was. In this case, what that timeline expectation was. I would explain to them, hey, this is an AmeriCorps position, has a start date and an end date and a certain number of hours that you need to complete. But then it wouldn't be enough to just say that. What I found is a lot of times people have trouble visualizing the future, especially right now. So I would tell them, I'd say, okay, this position ends, let's say we're recruiting in the fall for a position that ends August 2021. I'd say this position is going to end August 2021. Is there anything that you think might be different about your situation, the other commitments you have in your life, anything else that might be going on, which would make it difficult for you to continue this position through August 2021? So I just straight up present it in that way and help them think it through and give them a moment to actually realize, oh, we're no longer talking about the exciting start of this position, we are talking about the end. And I think that was an important expectation setting. And every so often you would get a candidate who would reveal something to you right then that you were glad to know. So I had a young person who was applying who was so excited about the position, and then I said, okay, this goes through summer of next year. So is there anything, just the way I phrased it. And then the candidate said, oh yeah, I actually am planning to apply for this internship in another state next summer. It's been something I've been looking forward to my entire college career. I just can't wait for it. And I said, oh, that's exciting. That's really cool. I'm glad you've got that in mind. If you were to get accepted for that position and you were also in AmeriCorps, what would you do? And they said, well, I would leave AmeriCorps and go take that internship. And I was like, okay, well, let me back up for a minute and explain that this is a little different than a normal position. It requires a commitment. It requires that you sign a contract that says that you understand that there's a certain end date. And I said, if you did this, you would have to give up going to that internship. Do you think that you want to do that, or should we reassess if it's the right time? And I would never make someone feel bad about it. I would just say, these are the facts. This is how this program works, and this may or may not be a good fit. And sometimes it was, sounds like a position that you might be interested in, but maybe now is not the right time. Maybe you're not ready to make that time commitment right now. So I just put them in the, spreadsheet on my warm leads list for next time and let them go on with what was a bigger priority. Okay. So those are some examples. Within this, you're also going to have 4 different types of questions. Rapport building is just what it sounds. You ask about the weather, you ask, how they're, I used to always ask, did you have any trouble finding the place when they would come and interview in person? I cannot do that anymore. So might have had any issues with, did you have any issues getting the link, logging on, something. It's meant to be a lowball question, so don't start them off with something really hard, like, tell me about yourself. It's meant to be something that's very easy and just conversational, and giving them a chance to settle in and be comfortable before you dive in. So you want a little bit of rapport building. Reflective questions are the ones that you find all over the internet. Things like, what is your greatest strength? What is your weakness? What is something that, what are 3 words you would use to describe yourself? It's all of those questions that are just a chance for them to be reflective and tell you about themselves, usually pretty open-ended. But then we get to the more unique questions. Situational. A situational question is a little like what I was just talking about with the good day and the bad day, but you get more specific and you get them to imagine. You say, okay, a typical day in this position, you might need to balance some priorities. So for example, you might be working with a client directly, where I might also be asking you to complete a report for AmeriCorps, and then you might also have a training you need to complete. I don't know. You throw out something that's a realistic scenario, and then you say, how would you handle that situation? And the whole idea behind this is that usually you can predict people's future behavior by how they think they will act. People are pretty good at telling you how they would actually handle something. The other final type of question is an experience question. And this is based on the idea that how people have acted in the past is a good guess as to how they will act in the future. So you say, okay, imagine a time, think back to a time in which you and your supervisor disagreed about something. Tell us about how you handled that and what you learned. A classic question like this is, tell us about a time you made a mistake. What did you do about it, and what did you learn? So this is a great chance for people to tell you about their own experience and give you an insight into how they problem solve, how they're resilient, how they maybe have handled conflict, communication, etc. So this, on the handout I'm going to give you afterwards, I'm going to have a little grid, and it'll show you just a little matrix, simple table really, of using all 3, content, chemistry, and commitment, across different types of questions. So you just want to create a mix in which you have some experience questions that are looking at their chemistry, experience questions that are looking at their commitment. So maybe an experience question about commitment could be, tell us about a time when you had said yes to 2 different things and you wanted to do them both, but you ran out of time. How did you handle that? So you can start to get to these questions that'll give you a little bit more insight into the most important factors in bringing someone on board. Okay, Kelsey, how are we doing?
We are doing well. Danielle made a comment that their first question is usually, how did you hear about us? As one of the rapport building questions. And
Good.
it is 8:32 right now.
Thank you. Okay, so hopefully that helps, and on that handout you'll be able to reference these and develop your own questions. I do recommend being pretty consistent, coming up with your questions ahead of time, and then asking each candidate so that you can have that fairness involved in giving everyone those same type of questions.